Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today I'll be reacting to your setups. First, we're going to start off with some setups that came in from patrons. I'll leave a link to my Patreon below. Basically, if you ever need to get in contact with me and you want to help support the channel, then this is the best way to do so. Now, the first one came in from Alyssa, and she says that she uses a deep heat projector and shade dweller with her gecko, and has a 3D background to help Kai achieve her arboreal aspirations. And that's the thing, you give a gecko opportunity to climb and they will. There's a nice area over here on the right which allows a gecko to bask and warm up on the rock, and as you can see it gradually gets darker, so the light and shade method has been applied really well here, so this is very nice. The next one comes from Heather. She's gone Bioactive and I think it looks lovely. I have one of those dwarf umbrella trees, the one in the back there. I have one of those in Drogo's tank, but I must admit I think I need to replace it because those grow quick and it is quickly outgrowing the tank. But yeah, I love these little bamboo plants at the front and these branches. This allows a gecko to sort of rest at different levels in the tank, which is really great for basking because we don't really want to force our gecko to only have one spot where it can rest, where it then may be constantly fully exposed to a lot of heat or UV. So it's really good to provide these different layers. Next, we have a setup from Millie. This is for her Leopard Gecko Aries. Now, she uses the following: a deep heat projector connected to a thermostat, very good, a 7% shade dweller, 2 thermometers and hygrometers on either side of the enclosure, earth mix arid on the cool side, slate flooring on the hot side, rocks, cork, leaf litter, etc. and 5 hides. So all very nice. The only thing I'd say is feel free to use a substrate on the hot side too. I find geckos really like to dig and kick and move their substrate around, but maybe you just prefer it this way, which is fair enough. But it sounds like the gecko has everything it needs. Then Mawson in this amazing photo of the crested gecko tank. I just love this shaded area. Like, if the gecko wants to escape from the heat and light, it can. And there's so many places to hide. Now, I do wonder, this coconut hide at the back, does your gecko use it? Because I always found my geckos love coconuts, but if they have at least 2 holes in them. I think the gecko likes to be able to escape if it has to. I made this hide for Lyra. It is actually available on our Etsy shop, link in the description below, but she loves it, and I think it is because they can sort of go through. So if you do have like a hide in your tank and the gecko doesn't seem to use it, it might be because there is only one sort of entrance exit hole. Anyway, very nice, More. Thank you for sharing this with us. Then Bruno shared this Leopard Gecko setup. This looks like a DIY vivarium, lots of ventilation at the front, which is very helpful if you live in quite humid areas, but just be aware of any critters trying to get in. I know in the past I've heard of people getting like ants in the vivarium and sometimes fire ants attacking their gecko. Hopefully this isn't a common occurrence for people, but this can happen, so just be aware of any critters trying to get in the vivarium. Now, I believe Bruno said he will be adding some slate under the deep heat projector, and generally I find that works far better than cork, so I think that'd be a good addition to the tank. Speaking of tanks, Laura did ask if we had any suggestions of vivariums, as she wants to upgrade, but recently they all seem to be quite flimsy. I haven't bought a wooden vivarium in a long time. Back in the day, I'd either have a Viv Exotic one or just a generic unbranded wooden vivarium because they're relatively cheap and easy to come by over here, and they've always been very sturdy. But as I said, I haven't purchased one in a while, so I don't know what the newer ones are like, but you can always look online to see if there's any second-hand ones. Now, of course, I use custom reptile habitat ones for my leopard geckos, and I have a habitat and an exoterra glass terrarium for my crested gecko and my chihuahua. So I'll leave links to those below, but if you have any suggestions for Laura, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Okay, now on to the ones you emailed in. We did have quite a few entries, so I'll likely make a second video, so don't worry about resending any more in. Now, the first one I have to say, It did set alarm bells off in my head. This is from Erwin, and they have a male and a female leopard gecko living together in a 60 by 40 by 40 centimetre tank. Editing me here, I forgot to mention this because I was kind of blown away by a male and female living together, that there is only, it appears, an analogue thermometer on the wall of the tank which will give you an inaccurate read, and all it will do is read the air temperature. There doesn't appear to be a thermostat or a thermometer probe underneath the heat source here, so you may want to make sure that that isn't overheating. So the first thing, never house a male and female together. Even breeders only bring them together for a short period of time in a neutral environment, so please separate them as soon as possible. Generally, I wouldn't recommend housing 2 or more geckos together. They do really well on their own, and especially in a tank of this size. So this isn't a good idea. Luckily, I will say the geckos look healthy at the moment. And I don't know how long these have been housed together. I would check that the female isn't carrying fertilised eggs. That could be a concern. You may end up with many more geckos. But please, if you can, you're going to have to really separate these geckos. You know, I have spoken about this a lot on my channel, so it is kind of disappointing to see things like this. And I can only hope Erwin sees this video, realises their mistake and corrects it for the good of the geckos, really. Next we have setups from Liz. Now technically these aren't leopard geckos, they're blue-tongued skinks, but this has actually been a species that I've been passively researching for years because I kind of always want one. I think they're really cute and inquisitive. Of course, I'm no expert here, so I can't really comment too much on the setups, and Liz, you probably know far more than me. The only thing I have a question about, maybe someone can answer this in a comment, is blue-tongued skinks. Should they have quite deep substrate to burrow? I feel like I read somewhere they love to burrow, so the deeper the substrate you can get, the better. Obviously, vivariums, a lot of the vivariums don't cater towards that, so it can be difficult to achieve this. I know Liz says that there is this big rock here that they can burrow under, and it is all sort of held up so it doesn't collapse. But yeah, I'd love to know people's feedback on this. Obviously I don't know enough about blue-tongued skinks, but thank you for sharing. The next setup comes from Sarah, and apparently she is currently awaiting her first leopard gecko. I wanted to know my thoughts on her setup, and wow, you have done an excellent job. When you first bring home your gecko, they're probably going to be wanting to decompress and hide, so it's great to see you've already provided lots of opportunities for your gecko to do this. And in my experience, if a gecko is able to decompress and relax, it's going to be easier to get it feeding and handling, so great work, this looks awesome. Next we have a 12 by 12 by 18 inch crested gecko setup from Karina. She uses UV and is going to go bioactive, but asks, I've heard a lot of variation for how long the tank should be left to establish itself before introducing the gecko. In your opinion, how long should someone wait before adding their gecko into a new bioactive enclosure? So Azure Gecko is a juvenile, soon to be adult. I imagine you're probably going to be building this bioactive enclosure in a separate tank because minimum for an adult is 18 by 18 by 24 inches. So this does leave you some time to actually build that tank, let it get established before having to move the gecko in. It's much easier than trying to change around the gecko's tank whilst it's living in it. Similar to a fish tank, I believe you are meant to technically leave it for a bit to almost cycle. You'll find that some plants won't make it, some need that extra time to get established, same with the cleanup crew. However, I must admit, most times when I've set up bioactive tanks, whether this is right or wrong, I have been rather quick to add my geckos into the enclosure. It hasn't had a negative effect on the tank, but I know some more successful bioactive tanks are set up with a lot more planning and waiting and, you know, soil testing and all sorts. So you can go either way. I haven't really seen anything bad about moving your gecko in relatively quick. Let's end things on a great setup, and as I said, I will do a second video as we have many entries. This setup comes from Rachel, who is from Amsterdam. So this was her previous 60 by 60 by 45 centimeter Exoterra setup for her Leopard Gecko, which is her first reptile, and apparently my videos have really helped, and that makes me super happy. It's the reason I do what I do, and I'm happy to see it's paid off because Rachel's Gecko Littlefoot now lives in a 100 by 60 by 60 centimeter enclosure, which is amazing. He has a 7% shade dweller, deep heat projector, and LEDs. The background is made of grout, paint and varnish, or animal safe of course, and I think this looks amazing. I mean, obviously Littlefoot is a fan, I love the background, I also love this sort of burrowing area. If I got more substrate for my tanks, I'd love to do something like this where they have the pile of slate, which they can bask on, they can heat up on, but underneath I imagine it's quite nice and warm as well, so they can sort of hide away and it's the same level as the substrate, so it looks like a proper burrow in the wild. This is fantastic to see. So I hope this video has helped. If it has, please leave a like and I'll be sure to do more in the future. But thank you for watching and goodbye.